If it's fun you desire, it's fun you're going to get at Flatstick Pub. It doesn't matter what the occasion is, whether it's date night, guys night, ladies night, or large group event, Flatstick Pub's got you covered. They have 6 great locations across the Pacific Northwest, from Pioneer Square to Kirkland, South Lake Union, Spokane, Bellingham, and Redmond. All locations offer the best pub experience in Washington. 2 rules at Flatstick Pub: drink local and have fun. Pretty simple. So if you like to have fun, love local beer, and great tasting food, make Flatstick Pub your next spot. Visit them at flatstickpub.com. Here we go. We talk college football with the one and only John Canzano. JohnCanzano.com. We can read all of his fabulous work. He joins us every Tuesday, brought to you by Flatstick Pub, with all the great locations across the state. You can follow John on Twitter at John Canzano BFT. You can also listen to this guy, right? Bald Face Truth Radio in Portland, Oregon, 750 The Game, 3 to 6. He'll take the airwaves today and say that was the best baseball game he's ever seen.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, John. How are you? How was your? We haven't talked in a few weeks.
I know.
Thank you. We did an emergency Mariners therapy pick up the pieces show last week. We're 8 freaking outs away from the World Series, so we put our last week's appearance on pause. But it's good to see you again. You haven't changed.
Thank you.
You look great.
I hope I do change.
You're writing great.
One of my goals is like, I want to be having positive momentum, Okay. I don't want to channel Tony Robbins here, but like that 1% better that we're supposed to get every day, we should all be striving to change just a little bit in a good way, right? Adapt or die.
We're supposed to get 1% better?
Just try to get 1% better today. Come on. How hard is that?
Yeah, I don't know. If I find it hard. You know what would
daunting? Does that sound daunting to you?
It does sound daunting. And what I've been thinking about here since we've last talked is, when I was coming out of the world-renowned high school, Kent Ridge High School, went to Washington State University. I was going to do broadcasting, but then my senior year, I was like, you know what? I want to coach. So I went to Washington State, and the first year I was going to become a teacher, teach like typing or something, nothing real serious, Do
they still teach typing, by the way?
I don't think they do anymore. My football coach was the typing teacher.
You would have been obsolete. Think about how lucky you are.
Yes. Yeah, yes. But I wanted to coach. I was going to go into high school coaching and all that. But then I'm thinking, as what I've watched here in the last 2 weeks, I could have been a high school coach and then work my way up into college and then eventually get fired and collect $50 million.
Yeah. A lot of money in it.
Good Lord.
That's different. That's different than what it used to be. But I think about a guy like Dan Lanning, his timing was just right. And his parents were teachers. And here he is at Oregon, probably has one of the best 3 or 4 jobs in the country and more security and money. Someday if they fire Dan Lanning at Oregon, he's going to be set. James Franklin set. Brian Kelly, I don't feel sorry for that guy. Set. It's a different world.
They can't sustain this. How can these schools do this? I'm thinking of like Scott Woodward.
Yeah. How
does he have a job as an athletic director? This is a guy who fired Jimbo Fisher and ate $76 million, has just fired Brian Kelly. He's got to eat another 50. So the 2 schools he's worked at, he's had to go to his boosters at his school and say, I need you to pick up the pieces for my mess.
Yeah, if coaches, I think, are the greatest beneficiary of what we have seen happen in college sports. With, we could talk all you want about the portal and NIL and how that's great for athletes. Look at the coaching salaries and look at the escalation of the buyouts. Look at the escalation of the guaranteed money. Look at the fact that like a guy like Curt Cignetti, it's unthinkable that we would sit back and go, hey, the coach at Indiana should be making $11 million a year. I think if there's any one element of college athletics that deserves a correction, it is the salaries of the highest level coaches that should be scaled back down. And those guys know it. And I'll bring up Dan Lanning again. I talked to him about, what a grind it is, all this other stuff. He stopped me and he was like, we know what we're signing on for, John. And like that Don Draper, that's what the money's for. It's for the headache and the grind and all that stuff.
It reminds me, though, where we're at in this country, like with corporations, right? Of the top CEOs making all the money, right? And then the people that work there, they don't make the money anymore. And so there's this great divide between the workers and the CEOs of these companies. And you see it right now in college football. I mean, Jimmy Rogers, who, again, I know they're 4-4, and he's not going to get any votes for Coach of the Year. I will be curious to see how they finish. They finish 8-4. I think he's going to get a vote or two. Guy makes $1.5 million a year.
Yeah.
It's like, and then to see what, someone like Lanning or Kurt Signetti makes, but it just feels like the bubble is going to burst on these contracts. Do you see that, or do you see it just keep going and escalate?
I think in this cycle, it keeps going because the TV money is what is driving all of the insanity is, hey, there's more money there. There's an expanded playoff. And so there's more urgency to get your team to the playoff. The portal and NIL in some weird way acts as this catalyst behind the scenes because now the athletic directors know, hey, we can't afford to have a bad season because if we have a bad season, we're going to lose the recruiting class and so now they're making, how many coaches right now, it's not even November. How many coaches, how many good jobs are out there open? How many experienced coaches are on the market because of that catalyst? I thought for a spell there, Puck, there was kind of the ADs were really patient last year because they were trying to figure out, hey, we have to come up with this new revenue sharing money. But now they've decided we can't afford to have a bad year because if we have a bad year, we're losing the recruiting class. And so there is so much pressure right now that is fueling these coaches and granted, the patience that you have to have with if you look at Utah and Kyle Whittingham, there's no way they would have been that patient with Kyle Whittingham years ago when he had some seasons that were subpar, but they stayed with him and they went, oh, we're better for it. I just don't know if you're going to be able to do that right now. A guy like Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, he had to turn it around. Early part of the season, they're talking about firing him. Now they're talking about building a statue for him. He had to turn it around. And it wasn't let me get through this year. It was let me turn it around this week. And that pressure is out there.
It's all because of the black hoodie that he has donned.
Yeah.
Ever since he's been wearing the black hoodie, that's been the difference. Has Lanning's name been brought up in these openings?
He's not leaving. And you always say that and you go, these guys are born to lie. I talked to Dan Lanning maybe a few months after he was hired at Oregon. He sounded and felt like a guy that was saying, hey, I have dragged my family around the country. His wife, Sophia, and their 3 boys. He said that his promise to his kids was that they would get through high school together and go to the same high school because they had moved 11 times, in 12 years. And so I even talked to Dan Lanning's dad and mom, they're both school teachers, as I mentioned. And, they told me, I think you're going to be surprised how long he stays at Oregon. Huh. I also think it's a really good job. Outside of Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia, Miami, it's one of the few jobs in this era with NIL meaning so much where you go, man, they have inherent advantages and they're in a massive power conference. They're probably in the most powerful conference right now in the Big Ten with all the resources. And he's got Division Street. And unless something changes, I think Dan Lanning's got one of the best 2 or 3 jobs in the country, and so why would he give that up? I think the job you have to be worried about if you're Oregon, given that Lanning went to William Jewell College, the job you have to worry about is not him going back to his alma mater. He's not going there. The job you have to worry about is maybe the Kansas City Chiefs job opening. He went to the Arrowhead Stadium as a kid. I could tell by the way he talks about the Kansas City Chiefs and going to the games. He went to 1 game as a kid. He remembers holding the cup of hot chocolate in the stands and it was cold. He remembers what they listened to on the radio on the way to the game. That nostalgia is the only thing that I think calls Dan Lanning away from Oregon. And I don't think that happens until his youngest kid, who's a 6th grader, gets through high school. So I think Oregon's got 4 or 5, 6 years with Dan Lanning. And granted, he told me, he says, after he lost to Indiana, he asked me, I was talking to him about the job security. He said, are you saying my seat's hot? I'm on the hot seat? And I said, no, but, I said, you lose to Indiana and, if you lose a couple more. And he goes, yeah, we're always 2 weeks away from being on the hot seat. And so unless something changes, I think Lanning's at Oregon. I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think his agent has any more leverage to play. They kind of played it the last time. He wasn't even a candidate at Alabama. They weren't even looking at him. Lanning came out, I'm staying at Oregon. No, Alabama wasn't even talking to him. Just brilliantly done by Dan Lanning and his agent. But I think Oregon knows they got their guy. I think Lanning knows how good he has it. I think it's one of those rare circumstances where a guy it makes sense for him to stay.
And speaking of his agent, his agent, Jimmy Sexton, just controls everyone.
Yes.
It's Lanning. He's got Lane Kiffin. He's got Kirby Smart. He's got
Mario
Kalen
Cristobal. He's got
DeBoer, Mario Cristobal, Sarkeesian. Who else is he? He's got? Well, he had James Franklin. I mean,
he's got some of the national broadcasters at ESPN. The dirty little secret is that Jimmy Sexton represents some of these broadcasters who are breaking news all the time on the coaching front. I wonder why. I wonder how they're getting their tips. You know why? Because Jimmy Sexton is representing not just the high-profile coaches, he's representing some of the national broadcasters who are out there, at ESPN and other places.
So who feel like what coach out there fills these jobs? I mean, they're good jobs.
I think you're going to
LSU's a good job. Penn State's a good job. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's the 10-year-old in me that will always think UCLA is a a good job, but I know it's not a good job anymore.
It's a good job for somebody who wants to live in LA. It's a really good job for somebody who wants to live in LA. But here's what I think is going to happen. I mean, Lane Kiffin's the domino. Does he stay? Does he go to Florida? Does he go to LSU? Does he just use those openings? He's doing a magnificent job right now, kind of feigning like, this is my job to focus on the job I have, but he's doing. As soon as Lane Kiffin decides what he's going to do, because he's going to be in high demand, Jimmy Sexton will start rearranging the chairs, right? And I think keep an eye on James Franklin. I like him for Auburn. I think that James Franklin to Auburn makes sense to me. It's a right move for him, right move for them. But Kiffin making that move, and then what other jobs come open, and then you'll start to see it trickle down, because there are some really good coaches like Sean Lewis at San Diego State is doing a great job there. Does he stay there, or does UCLA look over at San Diego State and go, hey, we'd like to have that guy. He's got a great offensive mind. He's done some good things. And then I think you look at Jason Eck at New Mexico. He hadn't been there that long, of course, but he's doing a really good job too. And you look at Fresno State's coach, hasn't been there that long, doing a nice job. Jimmy Rogers at Washington State. How does he finish?
Hey,
if you're a Cougar fan,
stop.
I know. But if you're a Cougar fan, maybe a 7-win season is good, not 8. Yeah, I'm just saying that because once he wins 8 there, maybe people start to talk. But
yeah, I get it. I think that's so. That's the price, right? It's the price at a school like that.
Yes,
you just understand they're not gonna stay there forever. What about the Fisher and his visor and his glasses? Where do you think Jed Fish goes? Do you think he stays? What if they finish strong and they could? I mean, their schedule's not that hard. They wrap up. I mean, and then they get Oregon at home.
I worry about Fish having no real connection to Seattle, and it's no secret his wife, doesn't seem to be there, anchored there. Okay, and I think from like Troy Dannon, the athletic director, who went there and then said I can't do this. That Seattle's the Pacific Northwest in general. It's not just Seattle. Sure. The Pacific Northwest in general. You've got to feel connected to it. And it speaks to some people and it doesn't to others. I don't think Washington fans think Jed's the forever guy in Washington. But I think if Jed's smart, he doesn't leave that job for anything but a no-brainer decision. And so is that Florida? Is that UCLA? Is that a no-brainer? I can't answer that because I don't know, what speaks to him. Is it his alma mater? Is it better weather in Southern California? Is it being in the Big Ten and having better weather? I don't know. But he could stay in Seattle and win 9 games a year and be lauded as a guy who's doing it the right way. And, Washington would be happy to have him in that capacity. So at the very least, his agent needs to be playing the game like a little hokey pokey right now. Like, hey, it's great to be loved. It's great to be wanted, because either Jed's going to get the job security that he really needs out of this cycle, or he's going to get an opportunity to move on. But again, I think this is kind of what fans are going to go through at most schools that aren't Ohio State or Oregon or Miami or Alabama. You're going to go through this, hey, if my coach has been moderately successful and there are other jobs open, those other jobs are going to say, hey, we can give you more resources. We can give you a better opportunity.
You expect them as they go into that game against Oregon, they finish up on November 29th to be 9-2. They go at Wisconsin, then it's Purdue and at UCLA.
Win. Those are 3 wins. Yeah.
Yeah. So 9-2 when they face Oregon.
And a dangerous game for the Ducks. I think people left the Oregon-Indiana game with serious questions about Oregon. Now, I think it's being a little too hard on Oregon, because I almost felt like there was a little bit of an emotional hangover from beating Penn State. They thought it was a great win. They go into their bye week. They're reading their clippings a little bit. Indiana came to Autzen Stadium in the same way Oregon approached the Ohio State game a year ago almost a year to the day. When it was very important. It was their Super Bowl. It was important for Oregon to beat Ohio State that first time at Autzen Stadium. Indiana had the same thing. Whole country was talking about how they hadn't had this validating win. They had been close a couple of times last year and got punked, in the playoff, and got punked by Ohio State in the regular season, and certainly I just think that game was super validating. Signetti gets the contract extension. The Indiana players after that game, Puck, stood at midfield at Autzen Stadium celebrating. Fans from Indiana who had made the trip and the band came to midfield. I was in the press box working, and I'm looking down at Autzen Stadium, and Indiana didn't want to leave the field. It was like they had won the Super Bowl. And so it was a breakthrough moment for them. So I'm not reading too much into it. Yes, it bothered me that Oregon, got beat decisively on their home field, but I kind of feel like Oregon's pacing itself a little bit. I still think Oregon is really good. They're super talented. Dante Moore, when he's on and he gets time to throw is great. I have questions about the offensive line, but it lines up as a very good game in Seattle because I think Oregon doesn't have the strengths that Washington has struggled against. Oregon is not controlling the line of scrimmage right now. And so I think it's anyone's game in Seattle.
Maybe a shootout. Listen, Husky fans would admit this as well. They don't have a very good defense. It's not poor, but it's not that good. Teams have moved the ball up and down the field on them. Yeah. But what they do have is just an absolute game changer behind center.
Yeah.
And again, that scares the life out of you. That kid is so dynamic and so good. And they might have the best three-headed monster in all of college football with Coleman and also Boston. So if they win the game, which they very well could win it because it's at home, gives them a great advantage. I don't think they would stand a shot if it was at Autzen, but the fact that it's in Seattle, and if you get in a shootout, that kid is just a dynamic playmaker.
I think that's a game. And I keep hearing from people, after, Michigan handled Washington in Ann Arbor, people kept saying, oh, that's not going to be a game. No, I think it's a game because Oregon has just not shown me that they can do the things that Ohio State and some of the more physical teams have done this year. And, you look at the tackles for losses, Indiana had something like 7 tackles for losses, 6 sacks against Oregon's offensive line. Happened again with Wisconsin. Wisconsin's defensive front controlled the line of scrimmage. Oregon's not pile driving people right now. And I expected them to be a little more physical at the point of attack. And that lines up nice for Washington. Washington can be in that game. I think it'll be a shootout, and I think it'll be a great, fun game. And if Jed Fish is smart, he doesn't do anything with his contract until after that game because I think he ends up holding the cards.
All right, the first of the Pac-2 championship game takes place this week. We'll get to that in just a quick second. Rob Akey is the interim coach, former longtime defensive coordinator, defensive line coach at Washington State. Now he's taken over the program. I'm sure you've talked to him. He's just, you want to talk about a guy that's Dan Campbell on 15,000 shots of espresso. That's Rob Akey. What is going on at Oregon State? They just seem to me, you've reported it, johncanzano.com. The assistant AD's out. It appears they're breaking their deal with their NIL group that they had a partnership with. It just seems to be a mess down in Corvallis right now.
There's an administrative mess. And let's back up to 20,000 feet. Pac-12 dissolves. Oregon State and Washington State are left on their own. I want people to wrap their minds around this picture because I remember going to that that Whitman County courthouse where Judge Gary Leiby, we should give him a shout out. You should have a bust of Gary Leiby in the background of your shots.
You know what I want? I want them to rename the stadium. Martin, get rid of Leiby Field.
Yeah. And his wife, you should get his wife Trudy on the show. She is a hoot. You want to talk about a hoot?
The Trudy Football Complex.
Yeah. Okay, so it's Washington State and Oregon State left behind, but think about what happened. Jake Dickert bails, right? Mm-hmm. Pat Chun bails. Kurt Schultz out. You've got Oregon State has Jonathan Smith bails. You start to think about who left the room and who's left behind. It's Scott Barnes, the AD at Oregon State. And by the way, he's inheriting a brand new president who came in right as the Pac-12 is dissolving. And she is great with engineering. She's a genius with engineering. She's a fundraiser on the engineering side. It's the right academic move for that school to hire her. But she doesn't know jack about football. She knows cricket. All right. And she's like a smart lady, whatever, but she's smart enough to turn to Scott Barnes and go, hey, this isn't my thing. I'm going to lean on you here. And so if you think about when the rebuild of the Pac-12 happened, who it really fell on, it fell on 63-year-old Scott Barnes, who, by the way, collapsed in April of 2023, had a heart attack, had to have CPR, almost died, right? So everybody else left. Barnes is left behind. I've been told that the Teresa Gold contingent at the Pac-12 headquarters has leaned heavily on Barnes. He's had his fingers on media deals, realignment, adding teams, expansion. He's been involved and distracted by that. And no one's going to say it at Oregon State, but I feel like he's been scattered. And I think it hurt the football program with Trent Bray that Scott Barnes had his eye off the ball. I think it hurt when, his NIL collective, the House settlement comes down, and every NIL collective in the country, when that House settlement came down, said, hey, we can take NIL in-house now. There's no need to have an outside entity. You can just take it into your athletic department. So everybody started shuttering those things or dissolving them or transitioning them into the university. Scott Barnes did what you do, Puck, or what I do when we don't want to mow our own lawn. We hire somebody else to do it. We outsource. It's an American thing, right? We all start outsourcing. You can climb up in that tree if you want, Puck, and I can. But there's something about outsourcing. Hey, my time's too valuable. So what Oregon State did is they told Damnation Collective, don't dissolve. We like the recurring revenue that's coming in, about $240,000 a year in just recurring donations. Mm-hmm. And we like to keep that going. And so why don't you just sell that to a third party, and then we'll contract with that third party. So Scott Barnes outsourced and then delegated. He told his deputy AD, Brent Blaylock, this is your baby. Go find us, an NIL partner that can take over Damnation Collective. He went out and they brought Blueprint Sports into the fold. Now, Kyle Bjornstad, who had built Damnation Collective, was a former basketball player at Oregon State. It's a very charming story. He loves his school. He was doing this because it was the right thing to do, and he wanted to fund athletics, and it's his way of giving back, all that stuff. And he ends up looking at Blueprint going, I don't like these guys. I don't like how they operate. Let me go find another. I don't want to sell to them. He wanted to sell to Lockerverse. It was another company who was offering a different payment structure. Blaylock in Oregon State said, no, we want to work with Blueprint. So that deal goes through. It turns out that the terms of the deal that were originally represented publicly were misrepresented. I am told that Blaylock behind the scenes even misrepresented the deal to some people in the athletic department. He wasn't just telling everyone publicly, hey, we're guaranteed $750,000 in revenue every year. He was telling people privately that, well, when you look at the contract, and there is no guarantee of $750,000 a year in there. It's just, it's a deal that is unraveling. They brought Blaylock into a meeting yesterday. They're not firing him. They're negotiating the terms of his exit. It's probably going to be we mutually decided to part ways. They are also unwinding the Blueprint deal. I'm told that's already been done. If they formally announced it or not, it's supposed to happen today at some point, that they're going to announce that they're no longer in a relationship with Blueprint. But Puck, the deal was that everything raised above $750,000 in this little gap were $750,000 to $1.15 million. Blueprint got 75% of those funds.
Jesus.
So if you're an Oregon State fan and you're giving to the collective, there's a chance that 75 cents of every dollar was going to a third party. Yeah, that is a tough sell. And it's a bad deal for Oregon State, as it turns out. So they're unwinding that. But I'm looking at Scott Barnes right now, and I'm going, gosh, like, okay.
Does he survive? How does he survive this?
Yeah. Well, the problem if you're hoping for his ouster is his president believes in him and has his back. And I understand why, because she's come in and she said, hey, I don't know sports. I need you to lead on all this stuff. And he has. He's done a good job leading sort of the resurgence of the Pac-12. And I think if you look at like the ultimate story, you go, hey, he was instrumental in those Mountain West schools leaving and coming to the Pac-12. Right. That wasn't Ann McCoy. That wasn't Kirk Schultz. That was Scott Barnes. He was in there. His fingerprints are on it. But while doing that, he didn't do a good job of taking care of his own house. And so he's got a contract that runs through 2030. I don't expect that he even thinks he's going to fulfill that, but it's job security for him. He's making almost $1 million a year, and he's good till 2030. What I think's going to happen is at some point here, he's going to go, do I really want to do this? Wouldn't I be better suited as an advisor and a fundraiser at my own school. Can I step down maybe summertime coming up and go, hey, I want to just go do this? And it's messy. It's a messy situation. I think they're hoping that maybe pushing or parting ways with the deputy AD, letting him hire somebody new. I think they're kind of hoping that personnel move helps him get them through this cycle. But he's got to hire a football coach. He's got to hire a deputy AD now. And he's got a fan base that is really not happy with where things are.
It's just a mess.
It is messy.
Well, who do you like this weekend? You like the Beavers or the Cougs? Who do you like on the field?
I like the Cougs. I how can you pick? You can't pick Oregon State. You can't do that. You can't. Not after what you have seen on the field, even against their dominating performance in the second half against the FCS school 2 weeks ago. Like, you can't pick them against a Washington State team that has gone on the road to Mississippi, gone on the road to Virginia, and competed, and seems to have found the quarterback that gives them a fighting chance to win. I think Washington State's tougher. I think Washington State is better. I think Washington State's only question is, are they weary from being on the road so much in the last month? Do they have the depth, to do this? And I think, frankly, they'll be up against an Oregon State team that, at least in the first quarter of this game, believes that it has a chance to win. I think it'll be really important for Jimmy Rogers' team to have a good start to this game. And I think if they get in there and have a good start, I think they beat Oregon State.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. They got to get off to a great start in that game. All right, listen, we got to touch on this story.
Yeah,
I know your time is valuable. You got to go. Chauncy Billups. This thing is, there's so many tentacles to this one. He's not involved in the NBA scandal of the betting, although I believe that he's somehow indirectly involved, because I've got to understand how he got involved with the mafia for these poker games to be the face of it. Did the mafia have something on him in terms of betting on games previously, and they were using this as blackmail to get him to be involved in this one? But what's the Blazer stance on this one? He's done coaching, I would assume. Like, he's going to lose his job.
I think he doesn't coach again, and I think there's a chance he's banned from the NBA if this unfolds in an unfavorable way for him. I'm hesitant to say that he's not involved in the gambling thing, but let's just say he wasn't charged. He wasn't indicted on the sports wagering part of this. He was just indicted on, the fraud and the poker game, the illegal poker games, and the role he played in that, allegedly. But there is some question here, and I think it's a reasonable one, about the person known as co-conspirator number 8 in the FBI's in the Department of Justice indictment. Co-conspirator number 8 is described as somebody who had a long NBA career, who coaches in the NBA currently, and co-conspirator number 8 had apparently tipped off people to the fact that Damian Lillard and others were going to be rested in a Portland Trailblazer, rested, not played, given basically a load management game in a game in 2023 against the Chicago Bulls. I believe co-conspirator number 8, all signs point to that being Chauncy Billups. Okay, so he, for some reason, they don't name him by name, maybe because it's not illegal to tell somebody who's not playing in the game. But the NBA certainly would be interested in a coach doing that, and that would be a likely NBA violation. So I think Chauncy is somehow probably wrapped up in at least talking, he's probably co-conspirator number 8. It signs point to that.
But why get him on the other stuff?
Because the other stuff's illegal. That's a crime, right? Being involved in that poker game, conspiring to defraud other people in the room out of millions of dollars. That's a crime. Is it a crime by the NBA standards for a coach in the NBA to say, hey, I don't think Dame's going to play today? So I think the reason why the co-conspirator number 8 is not named, and I think it's Chauncy Billups, is because the FBI and Department of Justice said, I don't know if there's legally a crime committed there, but there's certainly something that Adam Silver and the NBA would be interested in, and they should absolutely be investigating, because that is a violation of league rules and it's ethically wrong. The bigger thing, you hit on it, is why is Chauncy Billups in that room? What is he doing in that room with a legal poker game that has got all this cheating mechanisms, all this technology allegedly. What is he doing in that room? And I went through the indictment. I looked at the text messages that were exchanged between some of the other people who were arrested, and they're talking about Chauncy sitting at that table, and they're talking about him like he's in on it, right? I mean, clearly he's part of this game. In the movie version of this story, and the theory that I'm holding on to, in the movie version, I have to ask, like, in what way do you get wrapped up in this to the point where you have to play along with this? And the thing I keep coming back to is it possible that Chauncy Billups was playing poker and lost a bunch of money, and that this is his way to get the debt paid off? Hey, you come appear in our game as the celebrity person. I don't know. But in the movie version, that's kind of where my mind wanders. It looked to me like Chauncy Billups is part of the crew that's running this game. And you read that indictment, that's how it reads. And the way that they are discussing him at the table, they're not discussing him like he's a guest. They're discussing him like he's part of the team that is orchestrating this alleged crime. And so that's a serious thing. And he's got to be worried about his future. I don't think it was a coincidence either when he does the walk after he leaves the courthouse in Portland. He leaves wearing like that Clutch Sports hoodie. I think that Chauncy,
you think he was sending a message?
It goes a lot deeper. I don't think that's accidental that he wears a Clutch Sports hoodie as he's leaving the courthouse after being indicted. He's saying, "Hey, do you guys have my back?" Because I think just like Gilbert Arenas, Chauncy Billups knows more. So does Damon Jones. And I think there's a lot of people that have to be really nervous right now around the NBA.
For people who don't know, because somebody said, well, I don't understand the significance of it. Clutch Sports is the agency run by Rich Paul that represents LeBron James.
Yeah, and represents a lot of players. Was
LeBron interviewed or tried? Did I read that correctly? That people have tried to reach out to him from the FBI?
I don't know. I don't know, but I can tell you this. Rich Paul and Clutch, there's probably not a more powerful agency in the NBA. And so I think Chauncy was signaling, hey, I'm with Clutch. Is Clutch with me? But
the other side that we haven't touched on is the Rozier story of it. Yeah. But I'm not, again, listen, I like sports gambling. I think it was time for it to be legalized. I do understand the pitfalls of it. I think we need to eliminate the prop bet angle of it. I think the prop bet angle of it is just too hard to regulate. Yes. You can regulate games, the lines actually being fixed. You can see that. The prop bets, that's where all the issues have been in the NBA are the prop bets. That's what Porter got in trouble with. This is what Rozier's getting in trouble with. And that's easy because they can control that. Individually, they can control their stats. But what gets me on the Rozier story is that the NBA knew about it and that they investigated and were like, I don't know, we don't have enough there. Maybe we'll turn it over to them, which then leads me to the biggest conspiracy that anyone has ever thought about is Jordan. Why did Jordan leave? Did Jordan really just leave because of his father passing, or did Jordan leave because he got caught gambling and they told him to step away? So that just opens that whole storyline for people who don't remember that back in the day, because you think about it, if they're going to protect Terry Rozier, you think they're going to protect Michael
here's
Jordan?
The thing you have to understand about the NBA. I grew up believing that the commissioner of these sports leagues was like a judge or was an honorable person who had the integrity of the game at heart. Kennesaw Mountain Landis, when he banned the Black Sox players and cleaned up baseball. That's the illusion that I had. The reality that I have now that I have worked in this ecosystem and watched it is that the commissioner's job is not at all to keep the game clean or to actually advocate for the integrity or the health of the sport. The commissioner's job is to make owners money. And part of that is not to tarnish the image of the league and the brand of the league. The NBA's drug testing policy is the greatest example of this, and it's the easiest one to explain. How often do we hear about a player having a positive drug test in the NBA? You don't hear it. Why? Because it's confidential. It's a confidential program. I had Damon Stoudemire tell me one time, he said, you have to be stupid to have a positive test in this league. You'd have to be an idiot to ever have a positive drug test. And what turns out to be the case is that if you, let's say you're on drugs, let's say you're asked to take a test, let's say you know you're going to fail the test. All you have to do is voluntarily raise your hand, say, I'm not taking the test. I want to enter the drugs substance abuse program. They put you into the program. Nobody ever knows that you entered the program. Nobody ever knows if you had a positive test. The NBA is not interested in having its players suspended. They're not interested in the public thinking the players have drug problems. Look around the league. Used to be in the 80s or whatever, you'd hear about all these problems with players and athletes. You don't hear it anymore. Why? Because the players are so clean? No, because all they really want to enforce for is PEDs because it's a competitive thing in the NFL and otherwise. But these leagues are not interested in having anybody suspended or tarnishing the brand or the image of the league. And the truth is, that's all that matters. And that's why they don't do anything about Terry Rozier. And it's probably why Michael Jordan goes to play baseball. He wasn't good enough to go play baseball.
And it just brings me up to the story, and then we'll end it here. It was last year. What was it? A year ago or 2 years ago? Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
Listen, I love watching the guy.
Come on.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You will never convince me until ever that guy had no clue what was going on. You have to be a complete and utter moron. You just do.
Yeah.
The access that interpreter had and the wagering and the money, it's just the checks and balances don't make sense. But if you're Rob Manfred in your baseball, to your point, the last thing you could do ever was have that guy get caught in a betting scandal to where he's not only suspended, he'd be banned from baseball. That's the most global superstar they have in Shohei Ohtani.
I'll go farther. You had the Astros scandal, right? Manfred got through that. That was bad for baseball. It was bad for business. Cheating, sign stealing, bad for business. The bookies that are out talking about Ipe Muzahara's gambling say that, his threshold of bets escalated dramatically over time. All right. He's placing wagers on everything. I find it hard to believe, first of all, that Ipe Muzahara, who is cast as this undisciplined lone gambler, who is, it's just one guy, and he had all this. I have a difficult time believing he bet on soccer, he bet on football, he bet on everything but the one sport that was right in front of him on a daily basis. No, he didn't bet on baseball. I find that laughable that he didn't do that. Secondarily, I've been in clubhouses. I covered Major League Baseball. It was my full-time beat. And I know that Ipe Muzahara was around players in the Dodgers clubhouse. I think it's possible, Puck, that it goes beyond one player, and that the Major League Baseball was facing the possibility that you had a number of players who were, hey, this is the guy. If you want to place a bet, you run it through the interpreter. We got this guy in the clubhouse who's right here. I think it's laughable to think that he was disciplined except for everything but baseball. He was a mess. And then secondarily, is it possible he was placing bets for a number of other people and it wasn't just him? His history sort of indicates or maybe suggests that handle was, escalating so dramatically. He was betting on everything. I'm paying attention to what the bookies are saying and what the people who are dealing were saying. And then you take him, he takes the plea, he disappears. Like they just sent him, like he's overseas somewhere. He's on a private island and they just got rid of him. Oh. He's not doing any interviews.
If you haven't heard from him at all.
No.
Never, you're never going to hear from that guy.
This is Black Ops, man. I mean, they just got rid of the guy and probably cut a deal saying, you're not talking about this. We're not going to pursue harder. But if you have an interpreter who is placing wagers on behalf of a number of different players in a clubhouse, I'm just saying that as a possibility. You have the biggest scandal since 1919 in the Black Sox. Yeah. And you have one of your prime brands in the Los Angeles Dodgers wrapped up in this. So I'm wondering if is it not just limited to the possibility that Shohei knew, but did other people in that Dodgers clubhouse know? And, they're all traveling together, hanging out together. You telling me that Ipe Muzahara wasn't sitting in the Dodgers dugout going, hey, I've got an angle here, but let me bet on a University of Portland UCLA soccer match? Give me a break. Give me a break. I don't believe it either.
Next week, we uncover JFK. What really happened on the lawn?
You know what? I'll give you a little bit of a tease on that front. Bruce Barnum, the Portland State football coach.
Yeah.
His dad, Bud, was in the National Guard and serving at Andrews Air Force Base the day Kennedy was assassinated. He became a pallbearer and had to escort Kennedy's body. This is Bruce Barnum, Portland State football coach. His dad, Bud, came on my radio show. We did this whole interview about him being with Kennedy's body and the fight over the casket. And he was at the autopsy. He was in the room where they did the autopsy. All the conspiracy theorists want to interview him. I got a chance to sit down with him a couple years ago. He tells me he was held at gunpoint while the Secret Service and other agencies argued over who should be in possession of Kennedy's body. And, you know, he's just, there's some smoke there. That's all I'm saying. What else you want to talk about? Bigfoot? What do you got? What do you got?
Well, there's one name that we probably shouldn't bring up. All right. We'll see you next week. Thank you for the long extended chat, John. You're the best.
Well done.